I'm Jeremy Hensel, and this is an oil change on a 2006 WR250. We're going to start by putting together all the tools and stuff you'll need to do the oil change, and we'll go from there. So let's get started. The first tool you'll need is a socket set. You're going to need the metric sizes of 8, 10, and 12. It's nice to have an extension as well. Next, you're going to need an Allen wrench set. Make sure it's metric. You're going to use this to get your oil filter cover. I also need it to get my skid plate off. A torque wrench is helpful but not necessary. Just going to make sure you don't over tighten any of the bolts and strip them when you're putting them back in. A 3/4 inch wrench. This is for removing the oil hose from the front of the bike. A Phillips head screwdriver. This will be to remove the hose clamp from the oil hose on the front of the bike. You're going to need an oil pan to catch all of your used oil. I got a little bit bigger one just so I don't have to run down and empty it after every single oil change. You can never have enough rags. It's nice to be able to lay one out to place all of your parts on and then use the rest to clean up the oil that you've spilled or anything like that. Some vinyl or latex gloves are useful, especially if you're going to be using any of the brake cleaner on your oil filter. That stuff's kind of nasty. Of course, oil. Right now I'm using the Honda GN4 10W40, and a funnel does help you put it in. Brake cleaner or contact cleaner is useful for cleaning the oil filter screen in your oil hose, and if you're using a reusable oil filter. I use the metal Scott's filter, so I use this to clean it. This is available at any auto parts store. When you hear contact cleaner, it has nothing to do with your eyes. It's actually an electric parts cleaner. So if you go to an auto parts store, they'll know what you're talking about when you're looking for this. If you haven't bought one already, I would highly recommend you go out and buy the steel reusable oil filter. These are great, and over time you'll save a bunch of money, and you won't have to throw out all the paper filters. A couple of pieces of cardboard are really helpful, one for the floor, one to put in front of the frame bolt so when the oil shoots out it doesn't go all over the place. Last but not least, your owner's manual. Make sure you follow any directions in your owner's manual. Just because I did it on this video doesn't make it right. Now that we have everything we need to do the oil change, I'm going to get started. There are a lot of ways to shortcut this process. I'm going to go right from the beginning to the end without any shortcuts this time. I'll mention where I do skip some things along the way, but this is how to do the full oil change. Alright, we're going to start by removing the skid plate. Mine is held on with a few bolts that I can remove with a 10mm ratchet, and then a couple Allen bolts on the rear. If you have the original factory plate that's on there, it's just a couple of 8mm ratchet bolts. So let's take those off. Now that we've got the skid plate off, we're going to remove one of the frame guards from the side of the bike. It can also be removed with that same 10mm ratchet. Many people at this point would choose to start pulling apart the bike and changing the oil. When you have all of these parts off your bike, it is actually the most dangerous thing for your engine. Make sure you rinse off all of this grime that can fall into your engine before you pull the parts off. There are a few pieces you want to pay attention to in particular. Right here on this side of the bike, you have the oil filter cover. There's a lot of grime that can get around there. The oil hose underneath here, the oil hose in the front. On this side of the bike, you want to make sure you clean around where you fill the oil, up where you check the oil, up near the steering column, as well as the drain bolt underneath the engine right here. If all of this stuff is going to be clean, there's a lot less chance of anything falling into your engine. After I rinse the bike, I wipe it down, dry it off, and then start it up and let it run for about 5 minutes to warm up the oil. Now that it's all wiped down, I'm going to start it up for about 5 minutes and let it run. Just of course make sure you open up the garage door to let the air in. Now that the bike's warmed up, I'm going to place the cardboard underneath it, set a rag out where I can lay all my parts that I take off the bike so I don't have to lay them on the floor, put the oil tank underneath it, and get started. First, we're going to remove the oil tank cap. And as with everything I take off the bike, I'm going to place it on the clean rag on the floor. Next, we're going to remove the oil filler cap.
Place that on the rag. Next, we're going to place our smaller folded piece of cardboard against the front tire so the oil will drain from the bolt, hit the cardboard, and go down into the oil pan. This bolt can be removed with a 12mm socket. Now that we're starting to pull apart parts that actually contain oil, I'm going to put on the latex gloves. Once you loosen the bolt with the ratchet, you can screw it the rest of the way out by hand and just get ready for the oil to shoot out. Next, you're going to remove the crankcase bolt. When you take this bolt out, a bunch of oil should come out, but it should flow straight down and not shoot out this time. It's also easier if you use an extension on your ratchet to get to this one. Next, you want to loosen the hose clamp on the oil hose. It's the one right here on this side of the bike. Just loosen it up with a regular Phillips head screwdriver. Next, you want to remove the bolt on the bottom of the oil hose. After you remove the bolt, you can swivel the oil hose towards the outside because you loosened that oil hose clamp earlier. A lot of people at this point will just lean the bike over and let the oil drain out of that and start putting the bike back together. I remove this about every third or fourth oil change, and I'm going to do that today. Removing the oil hose from the frame itself can be a real pain. So I find if you rotate it back and forth while pulling down, it will slowly but surely come off. Once you pull it free, it takes a little bit of finagling to get it out of the frame. Just have to find the right spot. Let the oil drain out of the hose and put it with the rest of your parts. The real reason you're taking the oil hose off is not to get that little bit of oil out of the hose. It's actually to get to the oil strainer that's inside the frame here. So let's pull that out. When you pull this oil strainer out, usually you'll notice that there's not almost any grit or grime on it. That's why most people don't pull this out very often. I do it about every 3 or 4 oil changes. Some people never do it. Some people do it every change. It's kind of up to you. Next, you're going to remove the oil drain bolt from the filter. So this bottom bolt here will actually help you drain all the oil out from this side of the bike. It takes a small Allen key. Once you remove this bolt, it's a really great idea to tilt the entire bike over towards this side to get any remaining oil out of this side of the engine. Now that that's done, you can remove the 2 remaining bolts from the oil filter cover and pull the oil filter out of the bike. As you can see, I'm using the metal oil filter. It doesn't have much grit in there, but just enough so we are going to clean it. I clean this every single oil change. Here's a look at everything we've pulled off of the bike so far. Before we put anything back together, we're going to need to clean the oil filter and the oil strainer. Cleaning the oil filter and the oil strainer is pretty straightforward. You need to go out and purchase the contact cleaner or the brake cleaner that we had talked about earlier. You're going to spray these down, try and get any grit out of the crevices, and that's it. Let them air dry for a few minutes before you do any reassembly. You don't want any of that brake cleaner inside your actual engine. The thing about the brake cleaner is it's really nasty, so make sure you do it outside. I actually spray it into my trash can where there's a lot of air. Don't get it on your hands. Just be careful with this stuff. It's really gross. So let's go do that. While you're spraying, you want to make sure you avoid the rubber. This stuff will dissolve rubber a little bit. Okay. While I'm waiting for those things to dry, I like to take a clean rag and go around the bike and wipe down any part that has any grit on it that could get into the engine, as well as any of the pieces I removed from the bike. Wipe them all down and get rid of any of the dirt.